She didn't do anything wrong. She just sat quietly, reading a book, slowly enjoying her egg sandwich in a quiet corner of the first-class lounge at Boston Airport. No noise, no fuss, no rules broken. And yet, within 15 minutes, she was surrounded, judged by stares, whispered accusations, and even a crowd live-streaming the scene as if they were witnessing a crime. So what happened? It all started with a simple question: "Ma'am, could you please leave? This area is reserved for first-class passengers." Now, maybe you're thinking, well, they were probably just following protocol. But what if I told you that the woman did have a first-class ticket and was, in fact, an honored guest of the Department of Education? Do you see the real problem now? It wasn't that she didn't belong. It was that she didn't look like she belonged. A faded cardigan, a worn-out tote bag, a homemade sandwich instead of salmon salad or champagne, and most importantly, her brown skin. In less than 30 minutes, a chain of events unfolded that brought the entire airport to a halt. One phone call, one name mentioned, and suddenly, the same people who saw her as an intruder began to panic, stammering, apologizing, scrambling to make it right. Because she wasn't just another passenger. She was Evelyn Moore, the woman who made an entire nation stop and rethink. Because of one boarding pass and one wrong assumption. Her name was Evelyn Moore, and before anyone in that lounge knew who she really was, they had already decided she didn't belong. Not because she did anything wrong, but because she didn't look like the kind of person they were used to seeing in first class. Tyler, a young front desk attendant, was the first to approach her. He spoke softly, but with clear hesitation in his voice. "Excuse me, ma'am, this area is for first-class passengers only. Could I see your boarding pass, please?" Evelyn smiled, politely, calmly, not the slightest hint of anger. She reached into her bag and handed him the pass. Tyler stared at it, then frowned. Without a word, he turned to his supervisor. Melissa Grant, a woman in a tailored suit, high bun, and heels that clicked like ice picks with every step. Melissa approached Evelyn without greeting, without a smile. Her eyes scanned Evelyn top to bottom, like she was evaluating an item on a shelf she had no intention of buying. "I'm sorry," Melissa said, one hand on her hip, her voice louder than necessary. "I don't believe I've seen you here before. This ticket doesn't look valid." Evelyn nodded slightly. She didn't argue. "I understand, but I do have a first-class ticket. I've been invited to Washington for the National Education Summit." Her voice was steady, soft, like a lullaby. But there was something in it that demanded attention. Melissa smirked. "An education summit? They're handing out first-class tickets for teachers now." Around them, heads began to turn. A woman holding her phone paused, then lifted it to start recording. A middle-aged man leaned toward his wife and muttered, "Probably wandered into the wrong section. Doesn't look first class to me." Evelyn remained seated. She didn't defend herself. She didn't rise. Instead, she calmly took out her phone, dialed a familiar number, and said, "Hi, I'm at Gate 7A, First Class Lounge. There seems to be a misunderstanding. Would you be able to help clarify?" A few minutes later, a man in a gray suit rushed into the room. Sweat beaded his forehead. But his eyes, they lit up like he'd just found a long-lost friend. "Evelyn," he gasped. "Evelyn Moore." She looked up and smiled. "Hello, Caldwell." Melissa froze. Tyler stepped back instinctively. Dr. Caldwell turned toward them, his voice no longer warm, but razor-sharp. "This woman is my guest of honor. She taught my daughter how to write her first essays. She helped Emily through the grief of losing her mother. And this is how you treat her, like an intruder." No one spoke. No one dared. The lounge fell silent, except for the low hum of the ceiling fan, and the quiet rustle of people putting away their phones, deleting their videos. Evelyn remained seated. Same faded cardigan. Same half-eaten sandwich. But from that moment on, everything had changed. Dr. Caldwell walked straight over to Evelyn, not even glancing at the frozen staff around him. He extended both hands, clasping hers the way one greets someone to whom they owe a great, unpayable debt. "Mrs. Moore, I can't believe I'm seeing you here," he said. Voice rough, not from exhaustion, but emotion. "Emily still talks about you. Last year she wrote an essay on the teacher who changed her life. That teacher was you." And Evelyn smiled gently. "She's a bright girl. I just planted a few seeds." The crowd began to shift. Some pretended they hadn't noticed anything. A young man quietly pulled out his phone and deleted the clip he'd just recorded. But not everyone turned away in time. Melissa was still standing there, wide-eyed, lips pressed into a thin line. Tyler's hand was still holding the boarding pass, now burning hot in his palm. They had just denied service to a nationally honored teacher, a guest of the federal government. And worse, they'd done it in front of a dozen passengers, some of whom were still recording. "Do you even know who she is?" Dr. Caldwell asked Melissa, his voice calm but sharp enough to make her step back. I thought," she stammered. "I was just following protocol." "No." He cut her off. "You weren't following protocol, you were following your bias. She did nothing wrong, except not look like the kind of person you expect to belong here." Evelyn remained composed. She lifted her teacup, took a quiet sip, and set it down without a sound. She didn't need to defend herself. She didn't need to raise her voice. Because the truth was speaking for her. A little girl tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mummy, is she someone famous?" The mother leaned down, looked at her daughter. Then at Evelyn. "She's a teacher, sweetheart. And that's someone we should all treat with respect." Dr. Caldwell pulled out his phone and dialed quickly. "James, it's Caldwell. I need to pull the press team together. Something just happened at the airport. And I think we need a very clear public message." Then, Melissa spoke up. Louder this time. "Mrs. Moore, I sincerely apologize. If I had known you were a guest." Evelyn interrupted softly. "But you didn't know. And that's the problem. Silence. The kind that doesn't come from shouting, but from having no excuse left to offer." Evelyn stood. She adjusted her cardigan, picked up her worn tote bag from the seat beside her. "I'm not asking for anyone to be fired," she said, her voice light as air. "But I do hope that from today forward, everyone in this room remembers. Kindness doesn't require credentials. It begins with how you choose to see the person in front of you. As a human being, not a bank statement." Then she turned to Tyler, who still couldn't meet her eyes. "Young man, next time someone like me walks into a room like this, ask with respect, not suspicion." Tyler nodded. His cheeks flushed like a schoolboy being gently corrected. Evelyn walked away, not in a hurry, not looking back. The crowd parted for her, like water for a passing ship. No one stopped her. No one dared. And somewhere in that quiet lounge, someone just learned their very first lesson about dignity and prejudice. At first, it was just a few curious glances from across the pool deck. An elderly couple near the juice bar began whispering to each other. A little girl holding a pink flamingo float looked up at her dad and asked softly, "Daddy, why are they yelling at that man?" The father didn't answer. He just pulled her closer, as if Lamar's presence was some vague, unspoken threat. Karen Williams, chin held high, clipboard clutched tightly, took 2 steps back, eyes fixed on Lamar like she'd just spotted a wild animal wandering into a luxury showroom. She pulled out her phone, tapped the camera, switched to video, and hit "Go Live" on Facebook. The screen lit up and her voice rang out, cold, clipped, and sharp as glass. "Hello everyone. I'm at Ocean View Pool, where we, the residents who pay dearly to maintain this high, standard community, are now facing what appears to be a serious security breach." Her voice wasn't loud. But somehow, everyone heard it, as if by invisible signal. People who had been reading, applying sunscreen, or playing chess with their kids, suddenly stopped what they were doing. They stood up, they stared, they moved closer. Lamar stayed where he was, seated calmly on a lounge chair by the pool, holding his book like it was some kind of thin shield between himself and a crowd that felt painfully, familiarly predictable. Mrs. Chen from the 14th floor bent over to pick up a towel. A flimsy excuse to get a better look. One of the Martinez girls whispered to her friend while recording a TikTok. "Who walks into this kind of pool with a white tee and cheap flip-flops?" An older man paused mid-lap in the pool, water rippling around him, as he gripped the railing and squinted toward the commotion. Even the maintenance guy, who had been checking the filter system, stepped out of the shadows, his gaze fixed on the forming crowd. Karen went on, her voice now full, blown courtroom drama. "We've asked this individual to present proof of residency. However, he's refusing to comply. This kind of behavior is a threat to the safety of our community." Meanwhile, Brad, the on-duty security guard, stood about 3 feet from Lamar, one hand resting near his radio, his eyes darting between the man in front of him and the dozens behind him. The heat he felt wasn't from the sun anymore. It was from them. Lamar gently set his book down on the side table. He looked up at Karen, not angry, not afraid. Just calm, with an expression deep and tired, like someone who's watched this scene unfold 100 times before. "Mom," he said quietly, "I told you. I live here." A wave of soft laughter rose from the crowd, not because it was funny, but because it sounded absurd. Unbelievable, even. Some started recording. After all, no one wanted to miss a midday drama. In moments, the situation had turned into a public spectacle, where truth no longer mattered, and people weren't seeking answers. They were just waiting for the fall. And Lamar. He stayed seated, a still point in a crowd gaining momentum. He didn't argue, he didn't walk away, he didn't break the silence. Because maybe, just maybe, he wanted to see where the world would go this time. A tall man stepped forward from the back of the crowd. Salt and pepper hair, dark blue suit. A pair of sunglasses casually hooked onto the collar of a perfectly pressed white shirt. He walked with the air of someone who believed every square foot of this place belonged to him. "I'm Robert Sterling," he said clearly, voice low but cold. "President of the Ocean View Homeowners Board. And I can assure you, I've never seen this man at any of our meetings or on any resident list. Karen Brad, thank you for acting responsibly." Karen nearly beamed, as if she'd just been handed a badge of official authority. She nodded, her voice full of pride. "We're handling what appears to be an unauthorized entry, Robert. He's refused to show proof of residency, refused to leave, and even dared to challenge the rules." Robert raised an eyebrow and turned to Lamar, but his eyes weren't searching for answers. They were the kind of eyes that had already decided. "And where exactly do you claim to live?" he asked. Lamar's voice was calm, unshaken. "The main building. Penthouse. Top floor." A few chuckles rippled through the crowd, followed by some awkward throat clearing. Robert smirked, clearly thinking Lamar's answer was some kind of joke. "The penthouse. You say that with a straight face." "I do," Lamar replied. "Because there's no reason I shouldn't." Brad, the security guard, pulled out his phone and quickly scrolled through the resident management system. "I'll check the records. If you really live here then," he paused, brows furrowed, then, slowly, he typed OLAMAR, CLARs. At that moment, a hush fell over the crowd. Not because they expected anything, but because something in the air told them they had crossed into something far bigger than they thought. A soft ding sounded from Brad's phone. The screen lit up with a confirmed resident profile. Lamar Clark, owner of Penthouse A, founding member. Community fees paid in full through 2030. Brad looked up, his face pale. Robert frowned, stepped forward, snatched the phone, scanned the screen, and froze. His hands trembled slightly, though he still tried to force a polite, composed smile. Karen leaned in to look. She didn't move. Her body locked in place like stone. "No way," she whispered. Clark Industries." A second phone chimed from the crowd. Then another. And another. People were Googling the name. And as the search results poured in, the air around the pool shifted, like the quiet breeze before a thunderstorm. Lamar Clark, CEO of Clark Industries. Net worth, $2.8 billion. Real estate investor, major philanthropist, lead donor for multiple community development projects. The man who funded the original Ocean View development, when it was nothing but red dirt and scaffolding. Evelyn Moore once said, "I don't need to get angry, the truth will speak for itself." And now, Lamar Clark looked each person in the eye. "Seems to me," he said, voice still soft, "some folks here judge a man not by his credentials, but by his t-shirt." The crowd stood frozen. No more laughter, no more comments. The air was thick. So thick it felt like even breathing took effort. Not because the man in front of them was a billionaire, but because they had been wrong. Publicly. Cruelly, and worst of all, instinctively. No one said a word, not a single breath. Not a single cough. The name, Lamar Clark, hung in the air like a mirror, reflecting every glance, every comment that had been made just moments ago. Lamar stood up slowly, deliberately. He brushed off his swim trunks, a small gesture. But somehow, it made everyone who had once thought themselves above him now feel quite small. Not because he demanded it, but because he didn't. He picked up the book resting on the side table. Leadership in Crisis, the page still dog-eared at corner 47. Then turned to face the crowd. "I'm not standing here to teach anyone a lesson," Lamar said, voice calm yet clear, each word echoing with weight. "I'm standing here because I believed, perhaps foolishly, that even in a wealthy community, people could treat each other with basic respect." He looked over at Brad. "You did your job. But the real question is, if I had walked in wearing a suit, carrying a MacBook, and said I worked in finance, would you have asked me to leave?" Brad lowered his head. He didn't answer. But the look in his eyes said, he already knew the truth. Karen still stood frozen, but her hand had dropped from the clipboard. Her face, once tight with authority, now cracked like porcelain. each crack mirrored in the eyes now staring back at her. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Robert Sterling stepped forward. He no longer looked like the head of the HOA. Now he just looked like a man lost in a house he didn't build. "Mr. Clark," he said, voice noticeably softer. "If we had known." Lamar cut him off, not harshly, not angrily, but with finality. "That's the problem," he said. "You only changed the way you treated me after you found out who I was." He took one step forward. "That tells me respect in this place isn't something people are given. It's something they have to earn. To prove. To validate through tax records or brand names. And if that's the case, then this isn't a community, it's a stage." A middle-aged woman in the crowd quietly unlocked her phone. Karen's Facebook livestream was still up. Over 3,800 views, 700 shares, and hundreds of comments. Most of them not kind. "I'm watching it now," she whispered to her husband. "Karen's livestream. Everyone knows who he is now." Karen turned away, phone in hand. The camera was still rolling. Her heart pounded. Her hands trembled so badly she almost dropped the phone. She hit end stream. Too late. Thousands had already seen her narrowed eyes, her condescending tone, and the cold, dismissive glare she gave to Lamar Clark, a man whose name she never even bothered to ask. Lamar took a slow breath, then gently placed the book back on the table, beside a glass of water now filled with melted ice. "I don't need an apology," he said. "I need change." Then he turned to Brad, Karen, and Robert. "If you really believe in the idea of community, then start by relearning how to see people, not through a resident ID card, but through their actions, their attitude, and their kindness." He walked back to his lounge chair, as if the chaos moments earlier had been nothing more than a passing breeze on a quiet afternoon, and then he opened his book again. Page 47. This time, no one dared interrupt. Just as Lamar settled back into his chair, before he could reopen his book, his phone buzzed. A short message lit up the screen. It was from Jennifer, his media liaison. "The video's spreading fast. PR team's on it. Press is already calling." Lamar exhaled. Not with frustration, but with quiet acceptance. He had expected this. Not because he wanted the spotlight, but because he knew things like this always make the news. If the person being humiliated is famous enough. But not everyone's a CEO. Not everyone has a PR team or legal counsel ready on standby. And that was why Lamar couldn't just let it slide. He looked up. The crowd was still there, no longer agitated, no longer inching forward. They just stood still. Like people who just witnessed a car crash. And realized they might have helped cause it. Karen Williams stared down at her phone. Her Facebook page was drowning in a flood of angry, outraged, and disappointed comments. This is the same woman who organized the neighborhood book drives. No live streaming to humiliate her own residents. Someone tell her, discrimination at the pool doesn't scream upscale community. Karen swallowed hard. She turned off her phone. But the whispers lingered. And the loudest voice wasn't from the crowd. It came from inside her. "You were wrong. And you don't know how to come back from it." Robert Sterling stood stiff as stone, his face unreadable. But the glint of power in his eyes had vanished. The phone in his hand blinked. A strategic partner had just hung up. The message was clear. "We'll be reviewing our involvement in your next housing project. We'll be in touch, if at all." He knew what that meant. Review was corporate for terminate. Years of investment, threatened by one afternoon. One moment, one misjudgment. At the edge of the deck, Brad, the young security officer, still stood frozen. The radio on his shoulder crackled. "Unit 7 status report." Brad picked up the mic. His voice broke slightly. "Situation's under control. But I think we need an emergency meeting." Then he looked at Lamar. A slight nod, not an apology. A promise. A little girl, no older than 10, walked up, holding her mother's hand. She looked up at Lamar, eyes wide. "Are you the one who built this pool?" Lamar smiled. "I'm the one who dreamed it up. But the real builders were the best crew in the city." The girl beamed. "Thank you, sir. It's really beautiful. And today I learned something. Not everyone wearing fancy clothes is a good person." A soft ripple of laughter passed through the crowd. Not mocking. More like a breath released. A small way to begin again. Lamar nodded, his eyes softening. He knew. Real change doesn't come from outrage. It comes from silence filled by realization. He reopened the book. No one in the first-class lounge looked as composed as when they'd first entered. The sleek, upscale air of the space now felt cramped. Heavy. As if every LED overhead was no longer just lighting the room, but spotlighting the quiet, hidden thoughts no one wanted to admit. Melissa, the confident, polished manager, always with that half-smile of authority, could no longer find her voice. Her face had turned pale, eyes vacant, locked on Evelyn, as if the woman before her had suddenly become a mirror, reflecting everything Melissa had tried to hide: prejudice, assumptions, and the rush to judgment. Her hand trembled slightly as she adjusted her blazer, the button on her sleeve now undone, her composure unraveling. She took a step back, not from fear, but from shame. Tyler, the young attendant, lowered his head, nervously fidgeting with the name tag on his chest. I'm sorry, ma'am," he murmured, voice like a child realizing too late they had hurt someone they deeply respected. "I shouldn't have. I didn't think." But the words never made it out. Evelyn looked at him, not with anger, not even disappointment, just a gentle shake of the head. Her eyes weren't sad anymore, just tired. "I'm not angry," she said, her voice softer than a whisper. "I'm just tired. Tired of being judged by appearances." A soft murmur swept through the crowd. No one replied, but many looked down. They didn't know Evelyn Moore, but they knew the feeling she had just named, because at some point, they too had judged a worn cardigan and missed the eyes behind it. In one corner, a middle-aged woman quietly pulled out her phone. She had uploaded a 43-second clip titled, "Strange Woman Confronted in First Class Lounge." As the comments started pouring in, "Why did you film this? Do you even know who she is? You're spreading discrimination." She said nothing. Her finger hovered and tapped delete. Across the room, a young woman in a hoodie and headphones draped around her neck stepped forward. In her hands was a small notebook. I'm an education major," she said, voice trembling. "I just watched the live stream. Mrs. Moore, could I have your autograph?" Evelyn smiled. Not the smile of someone who had won, but the smile of someone who had finally seen light after years of walking in shadow. She took the pen and signed the first page. Then she looked the girl in the eyes and wrote, "Teach with empathy. Not just knowledge. Empathy." In the far corner, a few passengers still glued to their phones felt the shift in energy. The gossip quieted. One by one, people began gathering their things, not saying a word, not meeting anyone's gaze. They moved silently as if walking fast enough might spare them from being remembered in the story of today. Evelyn turned to Melissa. And Melissa, who had commanded teams, managed reputations, and handled complaints like clockwork, had never felt smaller. She finally spoke. "I'm sorry. Truly, I am." Evelyn didn't respond right away. She tilted her head slightly, then said, "I accept your apology, but don't apologize to me. Apologize for those who never got the chance to explain themselves like I just did." It started out as just a security camera clip, a routine internal review of procedure. But then someone, maybe a tech, maybe a witness who couldn't stay silent, uploaded it online. No background music, no edits, no commentary, just raw footage. A black woman quietly eating a sandwich in an airport lounge, being questioned, doubted, surrounded by suspicion, until a high-ranking official walked in and revealed who she really was. The video title was just one line: "She just wanted to sit down. Pay respect, teachers." Within 2 hours it hit 300,000 views on YouTube. By the end of the day, it was trending nationwide. No one expected a grainy surveillance video to break hearts across the country, because there was nothing dramatic about it, only truth. A truth so real, it felt personal. Everyone saw themselves in it. That one time they judged too quickly. That moment they stayed silent when they should have spoken up. That day justice got strangled by what looked right. News outlets picked it up fast. CN ran it in their American Voices segment titled, "National Teacher of the Year Mistaken for Trespasser at Elite Airport Lounge." CBS opened their morning broadcast with, "The story of a teacher who didn't speak loudly, but the whole country is listening." A late-night shows aired the clip, reacted, asked hard questions. But what truly moved people wasn't how the press talked about Evelyn. It was how the public did. The inbox at Jefferson High, where Evelyn once taught, overflowed with emails, handwritten letters, texts, and flowers sent to the principal's office. Former students wrote from all across America, from rural teachers to Ivy League law students. And they all said the same thing: "Thank you for shaping someone like Mrs. Moore." One former student, once held back in school and now a tech CEO in Chicago, wrote, "I was the kid everyone called hopeless. Mrs. Evelyn Moore was the first person to look at me with kindness. Now the world finally sees what she saw." The hashtag #ForRespectTeachers swept across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. People began sharing stories of the teachers who changed their lives. The ones who stepped beyond the chalkboard and listened with their hearts. And somewhere in that wave of noise a strange silence took hold. A silence of reflection. Of reckoning. Many educators admitted they cried watching the video. Not because Evelyn was insulted, but because they had lived that moment themselves. Just without anyone stepping in to stop it. Evelyn Moore never gave a public statement. She didn't appear on TV. She didn't post a rebuttal. But when a journalist asked if she planned to sue, she simply smiled. The truth's already been told. I don't need to repeat it on paper. And while America debated right and wrong, Evelyn Moore remained. Still present. A woman in a worn cardigan, sitting upright, hands resting on a closed book, eyes quietly focused ahead, as if waiting for a class to begin. The next morning, the airport management held an emergency internal meeting, inside a glass-walled conference room, a space usually reserved for discussions about profits, service metrics, and customer satisfaction. One name echoed differently that day: Evelyn Moore. Evelyn wasn't there. She didn't demand a public apology. She didn't call for anyone to be fired. She didn't sue. And she didn't show up on any of the exclusive interview circuits, despite dozens of media requests flooding her inbox. Instead, she sent a simple email to airport leadership. The subject line read, "A better way forward." Her message carried no anger. Just quiet weight. I'm not asking for anyone to lose their job. I don't believe taking away someone's livelihood is justice. But I do ask that Melissa Tyler and anyone involved participate in a training session on bias in customer service. Because sometimes, harm isn't caused by hatred. It's caused by ignorance, repeated too many times. The final line silenced the room. I don't want revenge. I want understanding. The board agreed unanimously. And for the first time in the airport's history, a full-scale training on unconscious bias in premium hospitality was launched. The instructor, a specialist in social psychology, once a former student of Evelyn Moore. Meanwhile, Tyler, the young staff member who had asked Evelyn to leave the lounge, still hadn't forgiven himself. Not because Evelyn blamed him, but because he now saw what he had failed to see. 3 days later, Tyler published a long post on LinkedIn. The title was simple: "To the Woman I Misjudged." In the post, he told the story. No excuses, no deflection, just honesty. From a young man who once thought he was just doing his job. I saw a middle-aged woman in a faded cardigan, and assumed she didn't belong in a premium space. I didn't ask her name. I didn't look in her eyes. I only looked at her appearance. But she didn't get angry. She just said, "I'm not angry. I'm just tired. Tired of being judged by appearances." That sentence changed who I was. The post went viral, over 1 million shares in just 2 days. And the comments flooded in, not to shame him, but to thank him. To thank him for the courage to face his mistake, and for starting a conversation the world so badly needed. Do we really see the person in front of us? Or just the story we've already written about them? And Evelyn read the post on a quiet afternoon from her front porch. She didn't respond publicly. She didn't leave a comment. But she did send Tyler a private message. Just one line. Growth begins the moment we stop defending the wrong version of ourselves. 1 week after the airport incident, Evelyn Moore's name was still in the headlines. But this time, it wasn't about controversy. It was about what she had awakened. Respect teachers. The hashtag born from that grainy security footage quickly became a national movement. Thousands of teachers from across the country began sharing their own stories, the moments they were doubted, the glances of quiet judgment, the offhand comments from people who never realized they were speaking to the very person helping their child dream for the first time. TM magazine published an op-ed titled, "The Lounge, the Cardigan, and the Lesson We All Needed." It opened with just one line. "We don't need a revolution. We need a reckoning." At Jefferson High School, where Evelyn taught for nearly 20 years, the school office overflowed with thank you letters and emails. Former students wrote from all corners of the country. "You were the first person who made me believe I could go to college. If it wasn't for you, I would have dropped out in 11th grade. Thank you for teaching us to read, not just with our eyes, but with our hearts." In her honor, the school board established a new program, the Evelyn Moore Fellowship for Inclusive Education, a scholarship for students and educators committed to building classrooms rooted in equity, compassion, and dignity. Meanwhile, in Boston, where the incident had unfolded, a major airport chain launched a new training initiative on unconscious bias and customer sensitivity. Not out of fear of lawsuits, but because they realized something deeper. An airport isn't just a place for arrivals and departures. It's a mirror for society, fast, distracted, and quick to judge. Melissa, the lounge manager, completed the new training and sent Evelyn a personal email. One paragraph made Evelyn sit quietly before her screen for a long time. I used to think I knew how to manage people. But I only knew how to manage procedures. You taught me that no protocol can replace kindness. And I know an apology isn't enough, but starting today, I want to begin again. Not to be forgiven, but to be better. Evelyn didn't reply right away. She thought long and hard. Then typed one simple sentence. Kindness is a habit, not a reaction. She closed her laptop and returned to her porch, where the March breeze rustled through the trees, and the season quietly began to shift. The world may not change in a day, but a word spoken at the right moment, a silence held in reflection, an act of courage done without asking for praise, can be the beginning of something much bigger. Evelyn knew she couldn't be in every airport lounge, every classroom, every conversation. But she also knew this. Each of us can be an Evelyn Moore. If we're brave enough to see others with our hearts, not their resumes.